Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode number 179. Grief sucks. Have you ever grieved? Season 6 of Wide Open Spaces with Elise, the fiery redhead. This season is going to be raw, edgy, and not politically correct. You can listen to this podcast anywhere you love listening to your favorite podcast. Check me out at wideopenspaceswithelise.com. Elise is spelled Ilise. And oh, don't forget to go to all my social media and love me and follow me. Now let's listen, talk, and evolve together. Thank you for joining me for this new season of my podcast. This podcast is listened to in 88 countries. Love saying that. And I'm going to highlight some. Now, of course, my home country, the United States of America, is where most of my downloads come from. However, in my 25,000 downloads, I have some countries that I want to give a shout out to. Nigeria, Japan, Kenya, and Peru. Those are just 4 of some of the countries who have been listening to this voice of the fiery redhead. Now, I talked about this season being raw, edgy, and not politically correct. Now, if you are a loyal listener, you'll get the same Elise, the same voice sound that I've been told that is very calming and relaxing, but you're gonna get the real side of me. In my previous seasons, I took a much more therapeutic perspective because I was a therapist that worked in psychiatric hospitals and facilities for years. Well, I'm going to take all that knowledge and all the group therapies and individuals that I've done over the years has made me who I am. But I'm going to incorporate a more raw and edgy side, the real true reality of what we are all going through in this world. You don't have to have mental health issues to be struggling in today's world. The world has become raw and edgy and not politically correct. And how do we survive in it? And that's what this new season is about. Now, the title, Grief Sucks, it sucks. And if you've clicked on this podcast, and you're not just somebody who listens to every one of my episodes, and thank you if you are, you saw the word grief and it pulled you in. And I understand that because grief sucks. I've grieved in my life over grandparents, over my dad, over other people that in my family or that I've known loosely who have passed away, a lot of people from COVID. I lost my dad during COVID, but not from COVID. And so I've experienced grief, and it's painful, and it's hard. And yes, there's the stages of grief that we all go through. But recently, I experienced a grief like no other. When a child loses a parent, if you've grieved that, you know what that grief feels like, or a grandparent. There's something odd and different about losing a best friend, someone who you raised your children with together, someone who, of all the few people that you actually talk on the phone to, was one of those people that you would talk to on the phone. Someone who always saw the positive things in you, who would compliment you, who would tell you when they're proud of you, who was just Switzerland and never got in arguments. So we have a group and sometimes we get in arguments and she just never was part of it. She always was the peacemaker. She was my friend Cheryl and still is. Cheryl passed away about 3 weeks ago. And I kind of, after the funeral, put on that denial phase that you go through. Well, it kind of just feels like I've gone away for 2 weeks or she's gone away for 2 weeks. But the reality is, I know it's not just 2, 3 weeks, or a lifetime. I know that she's passed on. And it's really hard to absorb. And if you've gone through grief, you know what I'm talking about. You hear all these things and they tell you what to do. I did it. I told my clients what to do when experiencing grief. I would have clients who would have lost their children. And here I was like about 26 when this person told me this. And I'm thinking, who the hell am I, this 26-year-old, telling this mom who lost her child how to cope? I was doing my therapeutic thing, what I was taught in college and in my internships. But I really never felt it. I had lost some grandparents at that point. But to know what it felt like to lose a child, God willing, knock on wood, that's not anything I will ever have to experience. But losing someone who is a friend, a confidant in your age group, I'm a little bit older than her, is a whole other realm of loss. And I don't want to go through the traditional stages of grief because I don't know that I'll ever get over it, losing someone the way we lost her. Cheryl had breast cancer. She had mastectomy. She had hysterectomy. She was clean for 7 years until it came back again. And at the end of this podcast, I'm going to share Cheryl's words with you. I just listened to them for the first time. I did a podcast in my first season. It was episode number 24. Now, I'll remind you, this was during COVID when we were all home and we couldn't see each other. So, and I was a new podcaster and I didn't know how to do things technologically. So I had Cheryl send me what she wanted the world to know about her breast cancer battle and journey. And so at the end, you'll hear me read what Cheryl wrote to me. Now, about probably 4.5 years ago, she wrote this. And so, 5 years ago at this point that she wrote this. And listening to her words and knowing she's not here anymore really made me sad. Listening to the hope and the relief that she says in her words kind of brought me to tears because I know that she ultimately lost the battle. And I think you can relate if you've seen someone struggle with illness, especially if it's a deadly disease that will shorten your mortality on this earth. It's cruel, it's ugly, it's unfair. Can any of you relate to that? Have you seen someone go through cancer treatment or MS or ALS or any other type of debilitating disease, heart disease, diabetes? It's hard to watch people that you love struggle, but yet they're here. And you want them to fight and you want them to be a warrior. But for some, the time comes where they have to let go. Or they don't let go, but it's just taken from them. And so grief just sucks. It sucks. I really thought about what I was going to do for this podcast, and I didn't want to do this one yet because I know I'm emotional, but I'm trying to be raw and edgy. And so here I am being really raw, and I miss my friend. And it gets me to think about all of you out there who go through grief and it's just pain. It's pain. It has happy memories that you think about, but then you realize that those are memories and there'll be no new memories. And there's a loss and there's an empty space within you. Can you relate to that empty space? It's like right there, right around your heart. It feels hollow. It feels sad. It feels heavy. Now, you may not have had recent grief. I still feel those feelings when I think about my dad or my grandfather. The emptiness, the heaviness, the sadness. And yes, as time moves on, you can talk about people and not get teary-eyed or cry. You can take those memories knowing they're your last memories, but smile and laugh about them. That's the waves, the ups and downs of what grief is. If you're grieving, don't be hard on yourself. I was sitting outside and I did something in her honor today and I started to cry. And I'm like, fuck, don't cry. Like you're trying to do this. But fuck, cry. You have to let it out. And it doesn't matter what your profession is or what you do or what you know is the right or wrong thing to do. You have to let yourself feel. And I did. And of course, it started the waterworks. And my eyes have teared up a few times already just sharing this with you, my audience, my friends. Because I want you to know you're not alone when you're grieving. It's a pain like no other. For me to think about my friend and her daughters that don't get to see their mom anymore, or her husband who lost his love, or her dog Parker who lost his person. I'm sure these are the things you think about when you are grieving the loved ones and the people in your life. It makes you sad. It makes you feel heavy. And you feel a little lost. There are so many ways to cope with grief. And for me, it's only been a few weeks. It's very new. I miss her. And I know I will miss her more and more and more. You see, we are a group of 7. One of us lives out of state. So when we would get together, most of the time it was 6 of us. But when our friend came, it would be 7. Well, now when we get together, and we have dinners and birthday celebrations and girls' trip, there will always be an empty space at the table. Her energy will always be there. And I'm sure you understand what I'm feeling. The energy that you get from that person when you think of them. And the loss of that physical energy of them being with you. I would love to know how you grieve. What are some things that have helped you get you through it, get you to move forward? Please, here, wherever you listen to my podcast, you can leave comments. Spotify, Apple, yada, 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 iHeartRadio, Podbean. You can leave me comments. I would love to hear some ways that you have utilized to help you cope with your grief. Because grief just sucks. It sucks that I can be here talking to you right now, but my friend isn't. Why am I here and she's not here? We go through that when we think of grief. especially if you have survivor's guilt and there was a trauma and someone passed away, but you survived. The whys and the questions and the guilt can consume you. How have you dealt with that? What are your go-tos when grief just comes out of nowhere and you've thought that you've compartmentalized it and then something triggers it and you feel it and that pain rushes over you again? I know you know what I'm talking about. That rush of sadness, of emptiness, of missing them. For me, I always go to my tried and true, which is music. Music can make me laugh. Music can give me energy. Music can make me cry. Music is just all-encompassing for me. And I really am curious to know, what is it that is your thing? According to Parade magazine, music is definitely a form of healing. There was research done in 2017 showed that 94% of participants purposely used music while grieving. While a pilot study was published in 2013 indicated that music could help with grief. There are many songs, if you keep this in mind, how music clinically can help you with grief. There are a bunch of songs. I can list you some songs. Tears in Heaven by Eric Clapton. Who Knew by Pink. Supermarket Flowers by Ed Sheeran. Heaven Was Needing a Hero by Joe D. Messina. Visiting Hours by Ed Sheeran. Yes, he's one of my favorite artists. These are just some. There are, if you Google, there are so many songs that can help you with grief. You can just read the lyrics. You can just listen to the song. You can belt out the song and cry as you're singing it. It is a form of release. And for me, in my grief, I find that that's what I need the most, because I have big shoulders and I can carry a lot and I can stuff a lot too. I found out that in the 2 weeks before my friend passed away, and there was so much going on and we were scared and we were afraid and fearful of what was coming. And I didn't even realize that my daughters who are away, had been talking to my husband because they were concerned about me. And I guess rightfully so. The trauma, the final text messages that she passed away, and the things on social media that her family were writing, her daughters and husband, was the finality for me. And so music is the one thing that gets me every time. And you may have that. You may be someone who likes to take long walks. And in that process, with your earbuds in, you are able to feel and release. Maybe it's sitting on a blanket on the beach or in a park. There are places that you know that elicit your emotions because you're relaxed, you're open, your brain is open, and it allows you to feel. And this is what music is for me. Now, the song, I'm going to read the lyrics to you next so you can understand a little bit more on how just the lyrics of a song can be therapeutic. And the song that I've chosen is the song that I used in the video that I made to memorialize my friend. They had a video montage at her service, and this song was in there as well. So for me, this song just says Cheryl, and it's called For Good, and it's from the movie and the Broadway show Wicked. So bear with me, listen to my words, listen to how this is therapeutic for me after losing one of my closest friends. For good. I'm limited, just look at me. I'm limited, and just look at you. You can do all I couldn't do, Glinda, because now it's up to you for both of us. Now it's up to you. I've heard it said that people come into our lives for a reason, bringing something we must learn, and we are led to those who help us most to grow. If we let them, and we help them in return. Well, I don't know if I believe that's true, but I know I'm who I am today because I knew you. Like a comet pulled from orbit as it passes the sun, like a stream that meets a boulder halfway through the wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? Because I knew you, I have been changed for good. It well may be that we may never meet again in this lifetime. So let me say before we part, so much of me is made of what I learned from you. You'll be with me like a handprint on my heart. And now whatever way our stories end, I know you have rewritten mine by being my friend. Like a ship blown from its mooring by a wind of the sea, like a seed dropped by a skybird in a distant wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? But because I knew you, I have been changed for good. And just to clear the air, I ask forgiveness. For the things I've done, you've blamed me for. But then I guess we know there's blame to share. And none of it seems to matter anymore. Like a comet pulled from orbit, like a ship blown from its mooring, as it passes the sun by a wind of the sea, like a stream that meets a boulder, like a seed dropped by a bird, halfway through the wood in the wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? I do believe I have been changed for the better. And because I knew you, I have been changed for good. Thank you, Cheryl. I feel better reading that. I got through it without crying, which was a miracle. And this is what I take with me. This is how I get through my grief. That I've been changed for good. She fulfilled her purpose here. And boy, did she have a purpose. So many people she touched. So many lives. So many lessons. Beautiful daughters that will have their own children, and they will remind them and tell them about their mom and what she taught them. We've all been changed for the good for knowing her. And I know as you're grieving or have grieved, you were changed for the good by whoever that person or whatever place they held in your life and still hold. Grief just sucks. Losing people we love sucks. Going on without them sucks even more. But that's what they'd want us to do. To go on, to check on their family, to be a part of their lives, to take the lessons learned like Cheryl with Switzerland, to try to be better, to be good. In your grief, think about what you've learned from the person you've lost. Maybe it's even just your pet. What you lost and what did you learn from them? Don't lose sight of what you've learned from them. That's how you honor them. That's how you move on and you live. By taking what you've learned from them and make sure you hold it, you utilize it, you follow it, and you incorporate it into who you are now without that person physically in your world. Grief is painful. And, well, I don't know where it's going to take me. I know it's going to be a long time. I miss my friend. I feel sad for her family. I feel sad for my friends because the light has been extinguished. But we will move on. We will always have that place at our table because she still is with us. And I think in your grief, that's what you have to remember. Not how they died, but how they lived. And I know that sounds cliche, but after watching somebody die from cancer, I don't want to remember that. I will remember how she lived. And now, if you would do me the honor and Cheryl the honor, I recorded from my episode 24 the letter that I read that Cheryl wrote before her cancer came back. And I believe she had told me, ironically, I think her cancer came back about 3 months later after I wrote this. It came back during COVID, and we lost time seeing her there too, and that just sucks. And I'm sure a lot of you who lost people or they were sick during COVID, and my dad passed away alone in the hospital. We have those things in grief too, that how that friggin' pandemic affected a lot of our lives. But she wrote this and I read it, and where I did my podcast in the beginning, was a little wonky, and so it doesn't have the greatest sound, but bear with me. And please listen, if anything, just to honor my friend and to remember her, and so that her message of hope, even though in the end, that warrior, her body just said it was time, it couldn't take the treatments anymore. Please listen to her hope that she talks about in finding out her diagnosis and all the things she had to do after that. Take that hope with you. Cheryl in her own words. Yesterday was 7 years since I was diagnosed with breast cancer. When I look back on that day, what I remember the most was how truly shocked I was. It was something I never thought I was at risk for. So I hadn't let myself think about it actually happening to me. That day changed my life. I had found a lump out of nowhere and really thought it was nothing. My husband and my mom pressured me to call and get the mammogram, which would be my second. I was a few months overdue, but I was only 41 and wasn't worried. Then things changed quick. When I went and got the mammogram and ultrasound, the technician told me the left room and came back with the radiologist. That's when I knew. I got a biopsy that day, but made them tell me they had never seen a tumor like mine that didn't turn out to be cancer. I remember going to my daughter's parent-teacher conference that day like a zombie. I saw my husband cry for the first time, and only time that day. I spent the weekend in disbelief and terror. Then 2 days later, when it was officially confirmed, my reaction was to go full speed ahead. All I could think of was, I can't die. I have to be there for my daughters. I would do more than I had to, go beyond to stay here for them. As I reviewed my options, I found out that I was positive for the BRCA2 gene mutation, which meant I was not only high-risk breast cancer, but also high risk for ovarian cancer. So I did it all. I had a double mastectomy and a full hysterectomy, all within 3 months. pain didn't matter. The loss of my breast didn't matter. The hysterectomy, young, didn't matter. All that was mattered was make it through this so my girls wouldn't lose their mom. That whole period of time seems like a dream. I feel like I was there, but I wasn't there. It was all so surreal. The waiting to find out if they got it all, if it had spread into my lymph nodes, the relief finding out I hadn't done either, the difficulty recovering, and the shock at losing my breasts. I had expanders immediately and then reconstruction. So I always had something there that looked normal, per se, but I couldn't feel anything and they weren't mine. But still I was so grateful. Nothing had spread, that I just accepted it all and dealt with it. My family and friends rallied and were there for me, and my family and their support also helped get me through recovery. My next hurdle was to see if I needed chemo. I fully expected I would. One of the hardest things was trying to mentally prepare to go through that and to lose my hair. I felt like I had already given up so much of myself, and I was praying there wouldn't be more. I looked into doing the cold cap, which some say helps you to keep your hair during chemo. I found out they had much hair had to grow back before you could get hair extensions. I was full speed ahead again, trying to make the best and keep the rest of myself. The day I found out I didn't need chemo was such a relief, and I was again so grateful, but I still needed treatment, tamoxifen. I was told taking tamoxifen for 10 years would double my chance of non-reoccurrence from 45% to 93%. It was a no-brainer. This medication has bad side effects, and I can say I haven't felt like myself since I've been on it. But it's my only choice, and I can deal with it to be here. A month later, I had to undergo a full hysterectomy earlier than planned because there was a 10% chance that I had ovarian cancer. An ultrasound had found some suspicious cysts. This time it was even worse. I knew that ovarian cancer was a silent killer, and I truly thought that this was it for me. I remember crying hysterically after dropping my daughters off at school. I remember not being able to function. I had to wait 2 weeks for the hysterectomy to find out my prognosis, and those were the scariest 2 weeks of my life. But again, I was given good news. It wasn't ovarian cancer. I was so relieved and grateful I was okay. I hardly remember the surgery, the pain, or the recovery. I know it was hard and uncomfortable, but it seemed so worth it to go through to be able to live and be here. I was doing great, and then a few months after the surgeries, as I was dealing with side effects from the tamoxifen, being tired, having no energy, a lack of serotonin, forgetfulness symptoms I still have to this day, I crashed. I got depressed. I couldn't function. Everything hit me. I could have died. What if I hadn't felt that lump? What if it hadn't been caught in time? I feel guilty because how could I be depressed? I was so lucky. I was okay. I didn't look sick. I had my hair. I had breasts, even if they weren't mine. How could I feel sorry for myself? Why wasn't I happier? How can I feel like this when so many others weren't as lucky as I was? Which added guilt to the list. It took counseling and time and more medication before I started feeling a little better. And it's gotten better over time. I was always a fairly healthy eater, but cut out more unhealthy things. I became a vegan. I did detoxes and herbs, and still do. I went back to exercising regularly. I'm super careful with what I put into my body now and taking good care of myself. Because it's always in the back of my mind that it can come back. That fear will never go away. I only have 3 more years left on the tamoxifen, and I am hoping when I stop taking it, I'll feel more like myself. But I don't think that's possible because this has changed me forever. I will never be the same person I was before getting diagnosis. I look at my life differently. And as much as I am so grateful and treasure each moment, there are times I still get caught up in life and don't appreciate everything as much as I should. That's when I have to refocus and look at the big picture and make changes so that I can focus on what really matters and remember how lucky I am to be here today and that I've been given a gift I can't waste. Cheryl. Well, once her cancer came back, it was full of treatments. She went to MD Anderson. She was on all kinds of trials for 4 years. Doing that gave herself 4 more years so that we could all have her in our lives. And I'm blessed for those extra 4 years, but she did struggle. She was always a warrior. She was one of those people that you would never know she had cancer. She always looked beautiful. And yes, she finally did lose her hair, but got these amazing wigs from someone called the Wig Fairy. So if you know anybody who suffers from alopecia or is going through treatments and they're going to lose their hair, check out the Wig Fairy. I went with Cheryl to get a wig, and well, it was magic. For somebody who their hair was so important to them, got this wig that looked like her real hair. Nobody ever knew she was wearing a wig. And what a blessing that was, ultimately. She used to listen to my podcasts, and I would mention her frequently. And she'd call me up, and she'd go, I listened to your podcast. I heard you talk about me. And we'd laugh. So Cheryl, I have a feeling you're listening to me right now. But yes, I talked about you today. Because her message, well, it's inspirational. And it helps me through my grief. And another way that I think is very helpful when you're experiencing grief, especially really in the raw like I am right now, look for signs. I recently was walking and I saw a sign and it stopped me in my tracks. It said, love you more. Cheryl said that to everybody in her life. At the end of a text, at the end of a phone call, when you would see her and say, I love you, she'd say, I love you more. And that was my sign that she's with me. And maybe you've seen signs from the people that you've lost and loved. Look for the signs. They really are a great way to feel them in that empty space I talked about in the beginning, that heaviness, that empty near your heart. It fills that space just a little bit. So celebrate the people that you've lost. Celebrate the love you had for them. Grief is painful. It takes time. It never fully goes away. It's just how we decide to reframe the thoughts about the loved ones that we've lost. Well, I was raw, maybe not so edgy, and well, the politically correct part. I appreciate you letting me have this platform, taking the time to listen to me. And I hope that in my raw emotion, you felt that you could connect with me, that you're not alone, that we're all grieving in different ways. But ultimately, there will be the other side of it, where you'll be able to smile and laugh and not cry as easily about the loss of a loved one. But yes, grief sucks. Thank you for listening to episode number 179. Grief sucks. Have you ever grieved? Remember, go to my social media, hit that love button, follow me, subscribe, and leave me comments about how you cope with your grief. Thanks for listening, talking, and evolving with me today. Remember, positive thoughts always create positive energy. Go out and explore all those wide open spaces in your world. And until next time, ciao.